We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Emily Rush. I am welcome to our state policy briefing, Uniting States Against Plastic Pollution. As I said, my name is Emily Rush, and I am the Senior Director for State Organizations for the Public Interest Network, which includes PIRG and the state PIRGs around the country, Environment America, state environmental groups around the country, and a collection of other nonprofits with a shared vision and strategy to tackling problems of abundance. I want to extend special thanks to Representative Marjorie Decker from Massachusetts, Senator Lisa Cutter from Colorado, and Senator Ben Allen from California for joining us today. We will be sharing 3 state policy solutions to the plastic pollution crisis today. From the time that we all woke up this morning until the time we go to bed tonight, our country will throw away enough plastic to fill the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, the country's largest professional football stadium, to the brim. 50% of all plastic produced is intended to be used once and then thrown away. And to make matters worse, most of that plastic probably won't get recycled. Globally, only 9% of plastics are currently being recycled. And since most plastic takes hundreds of years to fully degrade, almost every bit of that plastic will still be out there, piling up in landfills, littering our streets, and polluting our environment and oceans for generations to come. Our use of single-use plastics is growing, but thankfully, a number of states are leading on policy solutions. If you go to the next slide, this slide shows the 14 states that have taken action to either ban single-use plastic bags, foam containers, and/or plastic straws, and/or passed a producer's responsibility bill to require that producers of plastic packaging and waste create less waste in the first place and pay for solutions. Our organizations that pull together this briefing today have 3 primary strategies that we are working on to implement, alongside champs like the legislators who are joining us on this call, and numerous other allied organizations, experts, donors and funders, and activists. If you go to the next slide, our 3 strategies are: first, to eliminate the most wasteful single-use plastics that we don't need in our society anymore and are absurd to keep producing and using. Strategy 2 is to enable and encourage the more reusables containers and refillable containers. And number 3 are producer responsibility laws to actually put the onus on the producers of this waste to come up with better solutions and reduce the overall plastic in our society. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janet Dominitz, the Executive Director of MassPIRG in Massachusetts, to talk about strategy number 1.
Thanks, Emily. As Emily said, my name is Janet Dominitz. I'm the Director of MassPIRG in Massachusetts, and it's great to be with everybody today. As Emily said, I'd like to talk briefly about our strategy to eliminate the most wasteful single-use plastics, and there are 3 pieces to that strategy. Number 1, as Emily said, there's just too much single-use plastic. Overall, plastic consumption has quadrupled over the past 30 years, and from 2000 to 2019, global plastics production reached 507 million tons. Now, we don't want to bury you in numbers, but the point here is we obviously had modern civilization without single-use plastics. And the pollution from start, as plastics are made in part from fossil fuels, to finish, as we know, plastics are largely not recyclable, and when they are disposed of, they cause terrible pollution. It's just all bad news. So number 1 is, in our strategy to reduce the most wasteful single-use plastics, number 1 is there's just too much. Number 2 is we have alternatives, and you're going to hear more about that later, but we're not just saying ban this and that and, carry your soup home in your palms. From reusable bags to refillable coffee cups to laundry detergent containers, we know we can go back to the future with reducing packaging and reusable alternatives. Simply by putting straws by request in place in this country would eliminate so much waste. In just the United States alone, one estimate has us using 500 million straws every single day. Unfortunately, we went backwards a little bit during COVID as the plastics industry wasted no time pushing false information about how single use was a way to protect our health. So we took a couple of steps backwards, but that doesn't change the fact that reuse is growing all over the country and the world. And the third part of this strategy is we have public support. The public supports reducing wasteful single-use plastics. Just a couple of quick examples. In Massachusetts, 150 cities and towns have passed their own regulations waiting for our state law to pass. More than 20 years ago, the entire country of Ireland took this on by starting to charge for plastic bags. Connecticut, California, Delaware, Hawaii, Maine, New York, Oregon, and Vermont have all placed bans, some kind of ban on plastic bags. So in conclusion, we know momentum is with us. And in Massachusetts, the leader in the Massachusetts State House, who is charging ahead with that momentum, is State Rep Marjorie Decker, who I have the privilege of introducing as the next speaker. So Marjorie Decker, please take it away.
I think we're promoting her to a panelist position right now.
Everybody loves promotions.
All right, Representative Decker, we can see you.
Oh, hi, sorry. I apologize. This day has gotten a little bit behind than it was supposed to be. So I'm doing this from the coffee shop across from the State House. Great to see everybody here. And I guess just sharing with you some of the bills that we've been working on. And really, many of these have been bills where MassPERG's just been an incredible partner for me. And has been for a long time. I'm obviously a state representative and chair of public health. Prior to that, I was a city councilor in Cambridge, and I led the effort in Cambridge. And it took 3 years to do this successfully, to ban plastic bags in the city of Cambridge. And we're still moving forward and trying to get the state, obviously, to move forward with that. But probably like many of you, local communities are not waiting for legislatures. And as legislatures, we're not waiting for Congress to move forward. Currently working on a couple of bills, one that would ban polystyrene, as well as update our bottle bill. As many of you know, we did not have sports drinks and water bottles and even nips that exist here. And so we've been doing a lot of really important work together to try to create momentum. I'm actually feeling really optimistic about that bill in the legislature. And I think the science is clearly on our side when it comes to both updating the bottle bill as well as banning polystyrene, and hoping that we'll just continue building on the momentum that we have, and that we'll see it this year happen. So just trying to look at, there were other bills here that I was going to comment on. Thank you. So yeah, this is where we're at right now in Massachusetts. And I think our last bill that we all successfully worked on with MassPERG and myself was when we were successful in banning flame retardants from furniture, mattresses, children's toys, and car seats. And so we're hoping to duplicate that kind of victory and success. And having this partnership has been essential. I'm sure that's true for many people on this call. And I'm happy to answer any questions if I'm not capturing everything that you would like me to share right now.
I think we'll keep moving with some examples from other states, and then hopefully have time at the end for some questions for the legislators and advocates on this call. But next, Pam Clough, Environment Washington advocate, will be talking about a bill in Washington.
Thanks, Emily. Yes, my name is Pam. I'm an advocate with Environment Washington, and in Washington State, we passed a reusable bag bill in 2021. We passed a ban on polystyrene foam, takeout containers, cups, packing peanuts, foam coolers in 2022. And that bill also included some additional plastic reduction measures, like upon request for straws, condiment packets. And in 2023, our plastic-free coalition in the state wanted to continue to move beyond bags, move beyond foams, and think about how can we continue to eliminate some of the worst kinds of plastics that litter our communities and clog up our waste management systems. So we worked with an environmental champ in the legislature, then freshman Representative Charlotte Mena from Tacoma, and shaped up a bill that could build on the progress we had made so far in our state. And it passed the legislature in its first year with broad bipartisan support. Actually, in the House, it was unanimous, which was really exciting, but great to see both chambers having a broad bipartisan support. And so this new law does three things. First, where building standards already require drinking fountains, it will require water bottle refill stations to facilitate and encourage the use of reusable water bottles. You can see mine right here. Second, the bill will ban most new foam-filled floats for docks in Washington state, particularly the ones wrapped in soft plastic film. It's really easy for that film to break, for polystyrene foam to get out into the marine environment, Puget Sound, any lakes, rivers across the state. And the bill will also study the impacts on the environment of the foam-filled docking that are surrounded in hard plastic. So a lot of docks use floats that are made with plastic foam. And so obviously when they're damaged, that can leak into the environment, and that contains toxic chemicals. It'll harm wildlife. It pollutes marine and shoreline environments. And it's just, if anyone else has found polystyrene foam on the beach, it is impossible to clean up. It breaks into those tiny, tiny pieces. Foam-free docking is filled simply with air. It's a readily available alternative that can be used in the same applications at similar cost, and a punctured or damaged float can be easily repaired or replaced without any damage to the environment. So that was one piece that we were really excited about. And the last piece of the law will phase out many plastic packaging for toiletries like shampoo, conditioner, soap, lotions in hotels or other lodging establishments. This packaging is often used for only limited time and is often not recyclable because many material sorting facilities can't actually process packaging that is smaller than 2 inches in height or width. And that covers a lot of those mini toiletry containers. And switching to bulk dispensing is not only more environmentally friendly, but also more economical, which is why a lot of hotels are already starting to make that switch. So that's the highlights of the bill that we just passed in Washington state this year. And now I'll pass it over to Celeste Mayfrin-Swanga, who is the Executive Director of Environment Oregon.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Celeste Mayfrin-Swanga. I'm the Zero Waste Program Director with Environment America and the State Director of Environment Oregon, based in Portland. And I'm going to discuss the next strategy that we're employing in states across the country, which is enabling reuse. So as we've heard from the previous speakers, we need to eliminate the most wasteful single-use plastics like plastic bags and polystyrene foam. And in an ideal world, those single-use items wouldn't just be replaced with other single-use containers or products. Having single-use disposable products of really any material type can create a lot of waste and has environmental impact. And so ideally, as we're transitioning away from single-use plastics, those items are being replaced with reusable and refillable containers and products where possible. So Environment Oregon is part of a zero waste coalition here in Oregon that has been working for years to ban one of the most wasteful and harmful single-use plastics, which is polystyrene foam. Environment Oregon and OSPRG spent years knocking on doors, building public support for eliminating this wasteful plastic. And because of that work and the organizing work of our broad coalition, and because of the leadership of the amazing Senator Janine Salmon, who was unable to be here today, a bill to ban polystyrene foam food containers, packing peanuts, and single-use coolers passed both chambers of the Oregon legislature with bipartisan support and was signed into law this spring. In the coming months, Senator Salmon is going to be holding a work group with key stakeholders to help restaurants and other retailers like grocery stores navigate the best alternatives to polystyrene foam containers. And at the same time, we're going to be developing policies that the Oregon legislature can consider in the future to encourage restaurants and other retailers to move away from single-use to reusable and refillable systems. So stay tuned for the policies that get developed through that process. But we did start to lay the groundwork for that effort this year with the passage of another bill, which was Senate Bill 545. That bill was also sponsored by Senator Salmon and led by Surfrider Foundation. Senate Bill 545 will update Oregon's health code to make it easier for restaurants to offer reusable and refillable options. Because right now in our state, the health code is pretty restrictive. So the bill instructs the Oregon Health Authority, which is the state agency here that oversees the health code for restaurants, to do a rulemaking between now and next summer to update Oregon's health code to make sure that restaurants can offer reusable options in a sanitary way, whether it's offering reusables in-house, having customers bring their own containers, or using a third-party vendor. So that bill also passed both chambers of the Oregon legislature with bipartisan support and was signed by the governor. So coming out of this rulemaking, the use of reusable and refillable containers would be voluntary. So it doesn't result in a requirement for businesses to provide reusable and refillable containers, but it does provide more options for businesses that are interested in cutting waste, saving money, and responding to customer demand. So we think it's a really important first step. And passing policies to update the health code is a really straightforward way to give businesses and consumers the freedom to ditch single-use plastic and other products to cut down on waste. So I would definitely encourage any policymakers or advocates that are here to look into the health code in your state for both retail, so like grocery stores and co-ops, and restaurants, and see how restrictive it is for reusables, and see if there's an opportunity to update it, either by working directly with your state agencies that are responsible for the health code, or to do what Oregon did, which is to pass a policy to require that update. And please feel free to get in touch with me. I can put my email in the chat if you have any questions or need help navigating your state's health code. So in Oregon, we have a lot more work to do, but we're seeing really exciting progress happening in our state. And I'll just say we're seeing just a real appetite for reimagining how we can be shifting away from our throwaway culture of convenience and finding more sustainable options for our state. Reusables and refillables are the future. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jen Engstrom, the State Director for CalPIRG, to talk about our third strategy.
Thank you, Celeste. My name is Jen Engstrom. I am the State Director for CalPIRG, which is our state PIRG group in California. And I am going to introduce the next strategy for addressing plastic pollution, which is producer responsibility. So it's easy to blame the plastic waste crisis on people who litter or don't recycle, but the real responsibility for the plastics crisis lies with the companies that manufacture these products in the first place. In recent years, nearly a dozen states have considered producer responsibility bills for packaging, with Maine, Oregon, Colorado, and California putting the first 4 laws on the books in the last few years. So producer responsibility is the idea that producers of plastic packaging should take financial responsibility for the full life cycle of their products. So right now, plastic product manufacturers don't have to absorb the enormous costs of their products and what they inflict on the rest of us. Producers don't have to pay for the cost of collecting and transporting the trash that their products become. They don't have to pay employees to pick up the plastic litter from parks and beaches, right? That's left to us. And they don't have to pay the public health costs of the pollution from plastic trash in our incinerators and in our landfills. So as long as the producer's responsibility for their products ends the moment that they're shipped away, they are just going to keep making disposable plastic junk. So under a producer responsibility program, producers are financially responsible for the managing of the waste that their products become. Producer responsibility programs work because they change the incentives that make wastefulness so cheap. When manufacturers are held responsible for their products at the end of their lives, they tend to make different choices, right? And design things that are better in the first place, more reusable, repairable, recyclable, and resilient. So today we're going to hear from two state leaders who have introduced and passed producer responsibility laws in their states. We're going to hear from Senator Lisa Cutter from Colorado. She represents Colorado's 20th district, which covers the western suburbs of Denver and Jefferson County. Senator Cutter authored HB 22-1355, which will transform Colorado's waste and recycling system by requiring producers to pay into a fund based on the packaging around their products. And the dues paid will fund expanded recycling infrastructure to collect and reuse glass, aluminum, and paper, and create an incentive for companies to reduce the amount of non-recyclable and unnecessary packaging that is wrapped around their products. So is Senator Cutter here? It looks like yes. So I will hand it off to you. Thank you so much for being here and for your leadership on this issue.
Thank you so much. I can't figure out how to do a different background. So I'm one of those people that's doing a Zoom from my car. So thank you very much for all of the commitment in this area. I'm super excited to talk about this bill. So in Colorado, this was primarily a recycling bill. We have a really horrible recycling rate, about 16%, which is half of the national average. And many residents throughout the state don't even have access to curbside recycling. So the infrastructure just grew up in a really, really weird way, and there's not a lot of consistency. And just clearly we needed to do something. So we crafted this bill to charge manufacturers for their packaging and then use that money to build out a complete recycling system, including standardizing, which I think is really important. A lot of I unfortunately didn't hear earlier in the talk, you may have covered this, but a lot of the issue is people just don't understand. They don't know what to recycle and there's confusion. And so if we can create some standardization throughout the state, I think that's a huge benefit. So even though the primary message and really the primary goal is recycling and to create that kind of infrastructure, we also recognize that this would be an opportunity to help reduce packaging as well, especially plastic, which I have a personal, I don't know what you say, but I can't stand plastic. I mean, I'm sure lots of you agree. It's really a problem in our system. And so I love about this bill that we look at that packaging and the fees we assess these manufacturers who are, contributing to create the recycling system are based on eco-modulation. So that there's some kind of incentive, monetary incentive for them to reduce their packaging. So eco-modulation just means charging for things based on their degree of how environmentally friendly they are. So there might be a number of different factors, and it would include charging more for things that can't be recycled, like plastic. So we think that if we really ramp up this recycling infrastructure, companies can get their materials from these, they don't have to use virgin materials all the time. They can get their materials from recycling bins. So we're creating a circular economy, which is something I'm really excited about. And that'll hopefully encourage them to use more recycled materials, glass, aluminum, that kind of thing, since it can come back to them and be reused. So it's just beneficial in so many different ways. And in the process of this, I was able to go on a circular tour, like an extended producer responsibility tour in Europe. And they're doing great things along these lines all over the world, including now in many states in the US. So it's been done and it can be done, and it can be beneficial. So we're excited to see how it works. It's in the process of being stood up right now. And it will be run by a nonprofit made up of producers. And we've already selected this nonprofit is on board, and they're starting work. And in Colorado, that really seemed like the best path forward. I think every state obviously has different issues and different things they need to look at in crafting their policy. And we have a lot of limitations here on government spending because of our really complicated tax structure. So we couldn't stand this up inside an agency. This had to be paid for and on a separate, separately through another mechanism. And so the nonprofit needs to get approval for its plans from the state, and then this spring, and then there is an advisory committee for oversight. So this is a very complicated bill, and I'm sure most producer responsibility bills are pretty complicated. It took a lot of stakeholding. We had a lot of support, including CoPIRG here, which I'm so grateful for. We spent lots of time talking to every possibly impacted entity and kind of figuring out what made the most sense in terms of we don't want to just, do random carve outs. We had to have some kind of reasoning behind it. So we really took a lot of time talking to people and listening and crafting the policy based on that. And I hope, because of the work we've done here and because of the work other states are currently doing, I know I've talked a lot with Maine and Oregon, who created similar policies before we did. And hopefully all of us doing these kinds of things and moving in this direction will be helpful to those coming behind, and that it'll be become more of a accepted thing throughout the United States, and manufacturers will understand this is the way we need to move, and it'll be a little bit easier as we proceed. So thank you for asking me here to talk about this today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Okay, so now we are going to move to California. We'll hear from Senator Ben Allen. He is the author of California's Plastic Pollution Prevention and Packaging Producer Responsibility Act. This bill will not only make producers financially responsible for the waste that they put into our communities, but it also requires producers to reduce single-use plastic packaging and foodware by 25%, and requires that all single-use packaging and foodware actually be recyclable or compostable in the next 10 years. So Senator Allen represents the western part of Los Angeles County. He's been a dedicated advocate for reducing plastic pollution, worked on this bill for years, working to get it passed. So thank you so much for being here and for your leadership on this issue and sharing more about the work you've been doing.
Well, thank you, Jen. And it's just so great to see so many partners in this struggle from all over the country. Legislators who've been taking on these tough fights, and then of course spurred on and supported and working alongside the various state PIRGs. And it's gotten us to a place where when we first introduced our bill, 5 or 6 years ago, there was that then kind of spurred this virtuous cycle where Maine and Oregon and then Colorado passed bills. We weren't able to get our bill done, and finally we got our bill done, which takes all of the things that you've just been hearing about and then goes a step further with source reduction goals and mitigation fees and very strict recycling rates and dates. So I'm just very grateful to everybody who I've been hearing from on this call, because we've all been working in a virtuous cycle together that's allowed us to continue to push the envelope. And of course, at least in the case of California, I mean, when we were able to finally pass something as ambitious as SB 54, it really does have global implications just because of the size of the market in California. So just to kind of go through some of the details, obviously we all saw what was happening with China Sword. California in particular, being on the West Coast, Oregon and Washington can certainly relate to this. We were sending so much of our recycled material to China. Of course, we were kind of living a bit of a lie. We all, over time came to realize that so much of that material was ending up incinerated in waterways, in landfills in East Asia. And it's part of why the Chinese finally said, to heck with this, we don't want your trash anymore. And consumers were being misled here. And then all of a sudden our cities were being left holding the bag to try to come up with some solutions to deal with all of this extra waste that continues to pump out into the market. And so just like you've heard described, we decided we wanted to adopt a producer responsibility model. Similar to what you just heard about this nonprofit in Colorado, in our bill, producers form a producer responsibility organization, which is overseen by CalRecycle, which is our state's department that's in charge of waste and recycling. And then, you know, basically we've got this strict goal where all packaging and food serviceware have to be recyclable or compostable by 2032. And they really have to be truly recyclable or compostable, not just under perfect lab conditions, but they've got to actually meet a real definition of recycling or composting, so that they're actually compostable under our composting system in the state, and not just theoretically compostable or not theoretically recyclable. And we've got these rates and dates to back this up. So 30% by 2028, 40% by 2030, 65% by 2032. And then, as I mentioned, we've got this big source reduction requirement as well as part of the bill. We need to see a 25% reduction in packaging and food serviceware waste. Of the 25%, 10% is through either reuse or refill or elimination, and the rest has to be through lightweighting or concentration. We're really asking the producers to take some responsibility for just the amount of crap that they're sending out there, and really consider how they can revamp their packaging model in a way that will lead to a lot less waste. We've got an alternative compliance credit for post-consumer recycled content, which is capped at 8%, so as to encourage a certain degree of use of recycled content. But we don't want that to be an out altogether. We really did want them to focus on and spend time working on waste reduction in general. And so we've got these, there are various reduction targets that get us up to over time, to kind of scale up over time to our 2032 goals. The material that's considered, the material that has PFAS or other toxins is not considered recyclable. So, that's not a potential out. On this polystyrene issue, we didn't do an explicit ban, but we required polystyrene to meet an earlier performance standard, 25% recycling rate by 2025. By all accounts, they're not going to meet that rate. That, the Chamber of Commerce, it was important for them that there not be an explicit ban, but in the end of the day, this is a de facto ban unless they come up with some magical new technology and new infrastructure that we just don't anticipate them coming up with. By the way, if they do, good for them. I mean, that would be an environmental benefit. So they've got a fighting chance, but certainly nothing seems to suggest that they're going to make that goal. So they'll be phased out under the bill as well. And then there's also a lot of mitigation funding, $500 million a year that can be adjusted by CalRecycle if our plastic is reduced or increased and adjusted for inflation. But this is a fund, a very significant fund. I mean, $5 billion over 10 years that can be used to mitigate plastic pollution with a focus on disadvantaged and low-income communities who have bore so much of the burden of plastic pollution. So we're really excited about this. I mean, we're really hopeful this is going to be a game changer, and we're hopeful also that we can work with our partners in other states to adopt something similar. I think we keep, a friendly rivalry that's helping to make our collective rules stronger. I think for companies to comply with California's model, it's going to require some major changes, and I'm hopeful that other states will then adopt something similar to what we're doing, and we'll keep working together to keep pushing the envelope on this. But I see Emily and Jen and just all our friends from CalPIRG and the PIRG network in general that have been doing such great work in this. I mean, they've been with us from day one in California. And I know they've been working with all of you in all of your respective states. So thank you to Emily, thank you to Jen, thank you to CalPIRG. Thanks to Tina Andolina, my staffer, who's on this call as well, for all your really hard work. We had a wonderful coalition of environmental advocates who were involved with this. Just for one last thing for people to know, we had introduced a bill that was strong. We'd failed several years in a row to get enough votes to get across the finish line. We came achingly close several times. A group of advocates ultimately decided to qualify a measure for the ballot. And they got the ballot, they got the signatures, they qualified for the ballot. It was a strong anti-plastics measure. It polled well. However, we also knew that industry could come in and spend $100 million and probably defeat it. That then sparked a really special negotiation between the environmental community, environmental justice voices, local governments, who of course are left holding the bag, and then also recyclers, haulers, industry, producers, retailers, everybody in between. We were all sitting around the table negotiating together. And the deal was we had to get a measure that was strong enough so that the advocates who had put the measure on the ballot would feel comfortable pulling it back. But we also had to make sure it was a measure that that the industry folks felt that they could work with. And so this entire system that we've just described, which has been called the strongest plastics legislation in the country, if not the world. I mean, there's a couple other places that have really good systems that we're trying to match in Canada and in Europe and elsewhere. But this was also something that our chamber was involved in helping to develop. They didn't love it ultimately, but they agreed to it because they knew that we had them at the table. We engaged them. Their members are going to be part of the solution. Their members know their products. They know their customers. They know their markets better than any of us. And so as long as they meet these aggressive rates and dates for recyclability and compostability and waste reduction, they're going to have a lot of control over what happens. But ultimately, we give a lot of power to the department, CalRecycle, under the administration, to ensure that they actually meet these aggressive rates and dates. So anyway, now the hard work begins of oversight and rulemaking and making sure the system actually works. But we're really proud of this and looking to do a lot more to strengthen this regimen as time goes on.
Great. Well, thanks again to Senator Allen, Senator Cutter, Representative Decker for both not only being here today, but more importantly, your leadership on this issue for some of you many, many years at this point. It's been a privilege, I think, for our network to work with all of you and other legislators in other states on this issue.